Well, hi there. We have something really excited today for this episode of The Know. We're going to be talking about the different names of God that we use for worship. So, man, stay tuned so we can go through these names and learn some really exciting things about our God. So stay tuned on this episode of The Know coming up next. Well, welcome to episode 15 of The Know. Today, I am excited. We're going to be discussing maybe some of the names that are given to God throughout Scripture and we use in worship services. Maybe you've been in a church. Maybe you've been in a worship service. Maybe you've heard somebody pray in front of a crowd and they use different names to describe God. Well, today, we are going to be discussing some of those names. So, without further ado, let's dive into episode 15 that I am titling The Name of Gods, or the Many Names of God. I think it's important that we know that the Bible gives God many names, and us as the people of God, we use those names to worship Him, and they all have different meanings. I think it's important that we understand that these names are not made up, that these are not things that we just say to say because we think it's cool or to try to show off how much we know of Scripture, but these are names that are used for very specific purposes throughout the worship services. Sometimes it's very personal to whoever is either preaching or leading music, and they tend to usually use these names as they are teaching or worshiping, and they are sharing these because they are wanting to really speak the truth of who God is in their life and over the people, because it's important that as worship leaders and as pastors, we are not just saying the things that means something to us, but it's something that means to the people of God. So these are names, again, that are taken from Scripture, and they're not just made up. We are going to cover 9 of those names today in this episode. We could spend a whole bunch of time on different names, but being that I'm a worship minister, a worship leader, and I'm constantly leading in worship, I'm going to share maybe some of the ones that are used more in the worship aspect. And what I mean by the worship aspect of the service, I mean the music portion of the service. Now, some of these names may be new to you. There might be some names that you maybe not recognize or maybe never heard me say, or you maybe never heard some of them say, but all of these are worship related. All of these that we're going to be sharing today are names of God that really points us back to who He is and is very much specific to situations in our life, and we're trying to draw back to Him. So without further ado, let's just dive right into these names. Now, even though I just said we're going to dive into these names, I'll give you a quick disclaimer. The 9 that we're going to be discussing here today, the 9 names of God, these are not like in particular order. These are not like I'm reading them like, hey, this is in the Bible, this is the first name and this is the second name. These are just names that mean something to me, and I have put them in an order that means something to me. They don't necessarily chronological in the Bible. They're just what means to me, and we're going to go through this. Now, once again, without spending much more time talking about what the names are, let's dive in and actually tell you what the names are. So the first name that came to my mind as we were putting this together is called Jehovah Nissi. Now, what Jehovah Nissi means is the Lord is our banner, or my banner. It is a word, Nissi, Jehovah Nissi is a Hebrew word. Moses usually used it in the Old Testament, in particular when the Israelites were fighting against the Amalekites, and they were kind of trying to figure out all that stuff. And Moses replies to his people, and he calls out Jehovah Nisi, the Lord is our banner. So we need to gather our troops and fight under his banner. And I think that's important for us as a people of God to know that we have a God that is our banner. That when we come together as a people of God in a building, in a congregation, we're coming together, even though we all have our individual fights with the enemy, with our flesh, with different circumstances in our lives. We can come together as a congregation and shout out Jehovah Nisi, the Lord is our banner, and we all come under the banner of God, and we are willing to surrender to him, and he will become the God that gives us our battle plans. And I think it's really cool. The second name that we might have heard during worship from time to time, and there are worship songs actually written about this, and it's called Jehovah Jireh. Again, this is another Hebrew word that is used and is often translated as the Lord will provide, or the Lord is my provider. And this is something that we often, as worship leaders, we are shouting from the rooftops. We are making sure our congregations are sharing and calling out to God, because it is a good name to be able to, for us as the people of God, to share to each other and make that statement that although I can make things happen for myself, there is a God that's going to take care of me, and I can just surrender my life to him, and he will provide for me. And I think that's really cool as well. There may be another name that we've used in worship services from time to time, and it's Adonai, and this is often, if you read anywhere in the Old Testament, you see this word is used a lot in the Old Testament. And it, depending on whether you're looking at the Hebrew word or the Greek word, it could mean either master or owner, and which either way I'm okay with as a follower of Christ, to be able to shout out, to tell my God, God, you're my Adonai, you are my master, you're my owner. I surrender my life to you. I have no qualms in which way to lean in when it comes to this name, because I am totally perfect with calling Jesus my master. I am perfectly honest and open to call him my owner, because he saved me from sin, and man, he's my Adonai. You know, he is who I surrender to day in and day out. The number 4 name, the fourth name that we're going to be discussing here today is called Elohim, and this is another word that is translated, which means God is my strength. God is my strength. And I think this is another one that's maybe used more. I know I have used it more over prayer times when we're praying over people, when we are more in a reflective time in service, and we're calling, man, God, you're my Elohim. You are my strength. You are my comforter. You are who I rely on, because and this goes back to the passage of scripture that says, when I am weak, he makes me strong. He is my Elohim. That's the word that is used in that passage. And I think it's really cool that sometimes in our worship services, we are constantly calling out to him and sharing that he is our strength. Our number 5th name that we're going to be discussing here today is Jehovah Shammah, and this is again another Old Testament kind of name that is shared about our God, sharing about who he is. And this is probably one of my favorite ones outside of Jehovah Nisi. I mean, I love them all, and I call God all the names that we're going to be discussing here today. But a lot of times I tend to go over Jehovah Nisi, and then I think to call out Jehovah Shammah. This is another one that to me it's a great reminder, especially when I'm praying in my own personal time with God, and I'm praying in my own time, to be able to call that Jehovah Shammah, which means the Lord is present. And that is, I think that is something that sometimes we, as the people of God, forget, that God is present. God is not an absentee God. He is not, how do I say this? He is not out fighting some distant battles and completely forgotten about us here in the present time. No, God is present. God is eternal. He is unchanging, and He is constantly taking care of His people. So He is present. He is not a God that's distant. He is not a God that's forgotten about us, and that's why I love this one, Jehovah Shammah, because man, He is, like I said, He is present. He is here with us. Here's another one that perhaps you might not heard, or maybe you have if you've been to church for some time. And this is more used in reference when we're praying over people who are dealing with some really sickness, some difficulties in their health issues, or have gotten some physical things that are going through. We usually say Jehovah Rapha, which means He is the Lord who heals. Or I am the Lord who heals you. This is more from His perspective, telling us that He's the one that heals us. He's the one that has the power that created us. He is the one that can heal us at any given time. He's the one that can leave us in our situations. He is the one who has complete control over our lives, and He's the one that can heal us. And I think this is important for us to know that He has that. I think sometimes we forget that. We tend to pray, and I think that's why I love, I kind of put this in this order, because to be able to remind ourselves that God is present, like we said, Jehovah Shammah, and then to call God Jehovah Rapha, which means, man, you're the God that heals. You're the God that takes care of me. You're the God who make sure that I am in good shape and all that stuff. And I love that. Number 7, this one is called Jehovah Shalom, which you probably heard this a lot say throughout different things. It translates the Lord is peace, or if you just use the word shalom, means peace be with you. But I love the Jehovah Shalom because it puts the fact the Lord is peace. And I love that because sometimes, especially in the world that we live in, there's so many things going on every which direction, and man, there's chaos everywhere. And to know that God is peace, that the Lord is peace, He is the one who gives us peace, and not peace that is temporary, but peace that surpasses all understanding. I think it is really cool to use that name to remind us of who He is, and that the peace comes from Him. And that's something we can manufacture. It's not something that we get to kind of pretend that is there, but it's something that God does. This one, the next one, number 8, it's another one that we use. Perhaps you might not heard it often because it's kind of hard to pronounce. But this one is called Jehovah Signiku. And this one means the Lord is our righteousness. And now this one is used more. I know for me personally, I use it more in my quiet time for 2 reasons. Mainly because it's hard to pronounce. But when we're going to talk about righteousness, we know that we are not righteous on this side of heaven. We cannot be righteous without God. And I think this is something that, especially for those of us who serve God, who are in leadership, who and when I say leadership, I don't mean just pastors. I mean any of us who volunteer, who spend time serving God. It is important to know that our righteousness do not come from us, that our works don't make us righteous, but it is God who does, the God who heals, the God that pours His life into us, His blood over us. So His righteousness is from Him, that we are nothing without Him. And I think it's important to constantly remind ourselves who we are and who God is in our lives. I think that's really important. Now, this last one is probably the most known one. Number 9, this was probably the most known one, and this one is Yahweh. And if you go to our church, we've sang this a lot of times in worship, especially when we sing that song at your name, Yahweh, Yahweh. We love to shout your praise, and this is a Hebrew word for God that is used as a self-reveal name. It comes from the Hebrew verb to be, which means to be Lord. So Yahweh means to be Lord, and this is again, it's kind of like that Adonai word to kind of say He is God, that there is no God above Him. He is the God above all gods. You know, in the Old Testament and in the scriptures, we read of so many different cultures that had many different gods, and what I love about that word Yahweh is that it is so relevant or so important to us today in 2024, because there's so many things that take our attention or that take our worship away from God. You know, we see it. We have people that have stickers in their cars, that have jerseys of teams or of people's names, tattoos on their bodies, or different things. And this is just examples. Doesn't mean that they are truly worshiping those things, but we know there are people out there that do worship some of those things, whether it's race car drivers, football players, pop stars, themselves, money. You can fill in the blank. And then what I love about shouting Yahweh over our lives, calling God Yahweh, is to let Him know that He is the God above all gods in our lives. You know, all those little gods, all the little g gods in our lives, whether it's money, fame, whether it is accolades, whether it is whatever, you can fill all those blanks. We can shout Yahweh and make sure we're reminding ourselves that He is the God above all gods. Like I said, these are just some 9 names of God, and let me go through them really quick again, just so you can kind of maybe look these up if you want to, man. And this is Jehovah Nisi. It is the number 1 name for me. The number 2 name will be Jehovah Jireh. The number 3 name will be Adonai. The number 4 name will be Elohim. The number 5 will be Jehovah Shammah. The number 6 will be Jehovah Rapha. The number 7 will be Jehovah Shalom. The number 8 will be Jehovah Sikniku. The number 9 will be Yahweh. And like I said, these are just 9 names that are found in Scripture, mainly in the Old Testament Scripture, but these are all names that represent a type of worship to our God. And I love that that if you just have these 9 names of God in your life and in an everyday life, and you're constantly sharing these names and speaking these over your life, I think it'll put a really good perspective of who God is. I mean, when we worship God, we don't worship to show off our talents. We don't worship to show off or to be in front of a crowd. But when we worship God, we worship Him because there is meaning behind who He is in our lives. So as we come to the end, the conclusion of our podcast here today, man, I just wanted to share this. Maybe go through these names again and maybe figure out your order, and it'd be kind of cool to kind of talk to some of you guys throughout the weeks, throughout the days. You can comment below. Let me know what your order would be for you if you were to put them in the order in your life, or what they mean for you, or maybe what name sticks out the most that you can say, that's what's speaking to my life today. You know, like I said, for me, the number 1 name is Jehovah Nisi. If you know anything of what's going on in my life right now, I feel like I am battling equipment day in, day out. I've had more meetings and more times that I have spent working on equipment that I can think the last 3 years of being here at SMCC. But I know that I don't fight these battles on my own, that I have a God that gives me a battle plan. And His name is Jehovah Nisi. The Lord is my banner. And He's who I fight with and who I fight for. and He's the one that gives me the battle plan. So I hope some of these names have encouraged you today. Some of these names maybe may speak some truth into your life. Maybe you are reminded of who God is in your life. And I really hope that as you continue to worship Him, you will grow in your faith. You will allow God to speak truth into your life, speaks peace, that God will provide everything that you need, and He will give you exactly what you need in your life, because for me, He provides every time. Even when I'm messing with equipment that I have no idea what's going on, sometimes He provides wisdom that I don't have, and it's amazing to see what God does. So I pray that God will bless you and keep you, and you're having an absolute amazing week. And I really hope that these encourage you and bring some joy into your life. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Can't wait to see you guys next week.